Niaje watu, welcome back to the channel. It's been a long one, but I'm back again. My name is Kevin Outa, and I am a photographer and filmmaker from Kenya. This video is dedicated to be the BTS, or the behind the scenes for my feature-length documentary, The Gap. And The Gap is just I'd say a proof of concept, because my intention in my career is to make feature-length documentaries, and The Gap is it just shows what I can do, how far I have come in my career as well. And I would say that The Gap is a feature-length documentary that focuses on my own creative journey. I know that it's kind of interesting or kind of weird trying to make a documentary about yourself, but yeah, that's what I did. I interviewed my friends, my girlfriend, my family, just to get a better picture of how far I have come and to see also where I am going. Yeah, so I think that's just about it. So in this video, I will take you through the pre-production, the production, and the post-production, and a bit of my thinking in the distribution phase as well. Yeah, so that's just basically it. So as with any creative endeavor, this project came with its own set of challenges, and I wouldn't say exactly challenges, but it came with its own sort of learning experience, because this is the first time I have taken up something of this scale. This is the first time that I have tried to shoot something that has taken this much time. Originally, when I conceptualized it, I was aiming for it to take like 3 months, but it ended up taking close to 1 year, because I have spent, I'd say, 9 months from research and development up to the day that I finally posted it on YouTube. So it was a journey, I'd say. I think that some of the biggest challenges that I faced in trying to create this documentary was the lack of funding, because when the documentary had 8 interviews, so when you're taking up something of this scale, you have to plan out your finances very well. You have to look for support on the side as well, just to ensure that the project can be brought to completion. So lack of funding was a challenge. Scheduling issues was a challenging as well, because to align with the schedules of 8 people plus me, hata mi schedule yangu inapanga tu. It was not so easy, and I think that also life happens and sometimes things don't go as you would want. Yeah, so this journey had its own, imekuwa na lessons zake, and I'm very happy to say that from conceptualization up until the time that I published it, nimemanage. So it's been good, and it's just a balance of everything. Yeah. So the first step, as with any project, is pre-production. How you plan out your project, how you ensure that everyone you're shooting with is on the same page as you. So as with all my projects, I used Milanote for this project, just to ensure that I have everything in one place. I have all my visual references in one place, and also ensure that nothing falls in between the gaps, pun intended. Because for a project of this scale, 8 interviews, 4 different production days, editing, I think it's important to be well organized, just so you ensure that you get as close as possible to the vision that you have in your head. So I will take you through my Milanote board. Ilikuwa, it was massive as well. So my Milanote board ilikuwa monster of a project. So just have to ensure that everything was well organized. So as you can see, I have a board that is just dedicated specifically for this documentary, and I also just had the posters here, the potential posters. I ended up using this one, the different posters, just to keep me encouraged and keep me motivated. So in this Milanote board, I have divided this project into different sections depending on the stage. So the research and development part is also just an extension of the pre-production, because this is where I now laid out the first idea points that I had. So you can see the outline. The log line for the project is, how do you bridge the gap that exists between where you currently are in life and where you want to be? So here I just have like the basic story assets. I have laid out the documentary into 3 acts: the introduction of myself, my professional career, and now the gap. That is the 3rd act, addressing what exactly is the gap. So I sectioned the people that I would interview for the different acts. Okay, for myself, I would be in all acts because the documentary is about me. So that means that mimi ndo lazima nikuwe the center of attention. But now I divided the documentary into different acts and sectioned now different people for different acts. But in the end, in the editing phase, what worked was having the input of everyone in the different acts. I'll get a bit more into that a bit later as well. For the project, my intention was to use interview footage, verity footage. That is now footage of me in daily life, doing various tasks and speaking about myself or my journey, and B-roll of now the past projects that I have done, of me shooting, and the archived footage and photos now of me as a child, me in primary school, high school, just to help add on to the story and make the documentary a bit more complete. Now, I think for the most important part in the research and development, or in the pre-production phase, when you're making documentaries, is to create this documentary core application. A documentary core application was formed by IDA, the International Documentary Association, and a few other grant funders to help standardize the grant process. In the documentary core application, once you create this for your documentary, you can use it to apply to different grants without having to prepare different materials for each and every grant that you're going into, because they will most definitely ask the same questions from you. The main things that are important in the documentary core application is from in the introduction part to the key creative personnel. Those are the things that the documentary core application mainly focuses on. So you have the introduction, you have the synopsis, topic summary, artistic approach, filmmaker statement, all that up to here. And it just helps you get an understanding of the project that you have in mind even before you start shooting. You can have an idea, but how do you build up that idea to make it something that you can shoot or something that you can make into a film? So this documentary core application just does that. You can explain the story arc and the character arc. Now, just trying to understand the main basis of the project, the main idea behind the project, and how even maybe the story will flow. Okay, in documentaries, you can't judge how a story will flow, but having an idea of potentially how it can go will help you later on in the stages as you go down. Yeah. So I think this one was a long one, and I also added on a few things just to help me understand more of what I wanted to do. From here, the cast to the music and sound design, that is not necessary for the documentary co-application, but is necessary for myself as the filmmaker. Yeah. So I think that's just it, and I'll share all these documents as well if you want to see them, because it was a long one and it had a lot of information. Now, as we move on from the documentary co-application, we go to the mood board, storyboard, interview questions, shortlist, and call sheet for the production. Now here I have most of the visual assets. I have the mood board. In my mood board, I have sectioned it into two different parts: the interviews and the B-roll, that is B-roll of me. So this is just this will act as an inspiration for the different interviews that I was going for, which I'll share with you in the production phase of this. So it's just a visual representation of how I would want the project to be. And now, as we move on from the mood board, we go to the interview questions first, I think. So here I had the interviews for each and every person. Some of them had the same questions. There are segments that had the same questions, but my own interview was the master interview. So I made this. I created these questions first, and then I used some of the questions that I had here in the other questions for the other interviewees, just so it can help guide the story in the direction that I want it to go. Everyone had their own, so it was easy just to have everything on Milanote, because I wouldn't have to worry kwa email gani or where are they. So coming on production, I would just open the Milanote app on my phone and go to the different interview questions for everyone. As we move from the interview questions, we go to the shortlist. So these were the shortlists for the interviews. As I said before, I had 4 production days, 8 interviews. So each and every day had 2 interviewees. Yeah. So I know it looks like a lot of work having everything planned out like this, but it was important for me to ensure that everything was done well in the pre-production phase. The call sheet as well, just showing what time we would want to go to start shooting, and also explain the set that we are on and how I would frame the shot. Yeah, so I think that's about it with the pre-production phase. It was quite intense and a lot of work on the onset, even before we started shooting, because if I did not plan out everything as I had before, I do not know how the project would have gone. Because if I did not plan out the interview questions, maybe I could not have guided the storyline in the way that I wanted it to go. Yeah, so it was just important for me to ensure that everything was planned out adequately, or even more than adequately, beforehand, so that when we start shooting, now everything just flows. Yeah. So now we move to production, which is, of course, my most favorite part of any project. In my board for production, I have the different production days set out. I have 4 days of production, as I said, 8 interviews. We have the subjects for the shoot, the date, and the location for each shoot. So yeah, and I also just added everything here in these boards, in this production board, so that it would be easy to access everything at once. So I have the questions for each subject, I have the mood board for each the interviews, and I have the idea deck that I shared with the participants of the documentary. I also have the shortlist, I have the call sheet, and importantly, I have my gear checklist. So I used this checklist on each and every day before I left the house, just to ensure that I had packed everything before leaving the house. Everything that I needed for the shoot before leaving the house. This was very important because ningefika huko, if I got to the location and found that maybe I didn't have my camera, or didn't have my loves, or didn't have my light, then that would have been a very difficult shoot for me. So on packing, I just had ensured that I pack and tick everything on this checklist, and they can see the checklist is the same for every interview because I used almost everything that I have. Yeah. Mood board, questions, the interview mood boards. Open that up so that you can also just have a look see. I really love using Milanote because I'm a very visual thinker, so seeing everything here as it is makes it easy for me just to know, okay, this interview looks good, let me try to get that or get this one. Yeah. So now let's get into the actual production. Start, of course, at production day 1, which was the interview I did for my two sisters, Belinda and Priscilla. I did the interviews at her home, at Belinda's home in Kileleshwa. So this is now me just going through the setup process. I usually just try to lay out everything before I start looking for my angles. So you'll see me setting up the tripod, you'll see me setting up the lights, and now after everything has been properly set up is when I will start moving things around. So for production, because I had multiple days of production, I had to ensure that I was working with exactly what I have, not trying to overproduce, maybe. I think what I'm trying to say is I didn't think of trying to rent out any equipment, also because of budget constraints, and just didn't try to rent out any equipment and just focus on using what I have. So what I shot this entire project with was the Sony a7 III, that is my camera. And for lighting, I used the Amaran 100D and 2 small Ulanzi tube lights and a reflector. I also used the Holyland M1 Loves for my audio. Yeah, simple setup, a setup that I had access to for all the production days. Yeah, I think that is important when shooting, especially shooting documentaries or trying to grow as a filmmaker or photographer. You have to use what you have access to, what is closely available to you. Because if you think that maybe I'll rent something out, I'll rent a camera out, you will have to wait until you are able to rent it out so that you can go shoot. But if you use what is easily accessible to you, it will be possible to shoot everything in the manner that you desire, or shoot everything easily with the gear that you have available. So I think the most important thing here is to ensure that I moved everything around and got the angle that I wanted for the first interview. And I think these are some of the BTS shots as well from the day. You can see my light, my camera, me there with my sister. Yeah, simple setup, and this is the lighting breakdown as well. Just to give you a better insight of the layout of the room and how exactly I used my equipment. So I used a kind of 3-point setup with the Milanote 100D as the key light, with a softbox and grid, and the 2 Lanzi tube lights as the hair light. And for this one, I used the silver side of the reflector because I wanted a bit more level coming back onto her face. I felt like her face, some of her face was getting lost in the darkness on the shadows, on the shadow side. Yeah. So this is also the BTS for my elder sister Priscilla. Same setup, 3-light setup. Tried to motivate the light source from the window. Yeah, I think not much to say here as well. So the difference from this interview from the first one was that now I used the same 3-point setup, but instead of using the silver side of the reflector, I used the black or the negative fill, just to add a bit more shape and contrast into the shadow side of her face. So this is me on production day 2. That day was raining a good one. But at least I left the house early enough and got to Belinda's house early enough, because on this day I was shooting with my parents, my dad and my mom. Yeah, so kila kitu ilikuwa in order. My dad is a character, so for his interview, as you can see, for his interview, I placed my key light, the Amaran 100D, outside the balcony door. And now I didn't put a grid on this one because the shears would also help me just act as sort of double diffusion layer. And I can say that his images, his interview also came out well, beautifully. But now for this one, I think the thing that I would change is the lights that are on top of his head, because as you can see in the final interview frame, the light above his head was looking a bit too saucy. So I think the thing that I would have done is pushed it a bit more towards the side of the balcony door, so that it can, instead of edging the shadow side of his face, it would have edged out the lit side of his face and look a bit more real. Yeah. So for my mom, we had 2 windows on either side. We shot into a corner and we had 2 windows. So this was a simple setup as well. I think I like this interview because the final interview frame showed the 2 windows showing on either side, and the lighting for this interview also felt a bit more motivated, because on her face you can think that the light is coming from the window, and on the shadow side of her face and on her hair you feel like the light is coming from the window that is behind her, but in reality it is coming from the 2 tube lights that I used as the hair light. Production day 3 is where I was shooting myself and my girlfriend. This one was for the first production day, this one, production day 3, had 2 attempts. Production day 3 had 2 attempts. For the first day, for my own interview, there's some questions that I had sectioned out and tried to cover it in a verite style. By this I just mean that I tried to cover it as I was doing normal actions, like regular actions, daily interactions, but it didn't come out as I expected because I was nervous and I felt that I couldn't properly articulate my thoughts or the things that I wanted to say. Yeah, so I was nervous and I just scrapped that. We also tried to shoot with my girlfriend on this day, but I think I was the kind of lighting setup that I was going for in her interview did not match with the other interviews. So I thought that this one it would make the project, her interview seem too different from the entire project. So I asked her and she agreed if we can shoot again. So I was very happy with that. And now we go to day 3, part 2. So for this day, I didn't really capture any BTS, but the thing that I was able to do on this day was, after setting up the lights, I was just able to bring the lights into play one by one and show you the effect that each of the light had on the set. So that is her without any lights on. Then I kick on the 2 tube lights and the negative fill, and then I finally brought in the key light into play. So for this, I think what I did with this differently from with this interview from the one that we shot first, I removed the grid from the light and allowed the light just to flood the entire room and bring up the level in the entire room. So aside from lighting her specifically, it also just lit the entire room, helping lift the ambience in the room and lifting the levels in the room. So this is the lighting setup for me. Same shot-ish, but I just changed where the light was and the camera was so that I can shoot into the opposite corner of the room. Same idea, using the light not just to light me alone, but also just to lift up the levels and the ambience of the room. So on production day 4, that is when I shot Josh and Legs, and I love shooting with Josh because it always helps me capture the BTS. So as I was setting up for the interview, he was shooting me and helping me capture BTS for this setup. For this interview, we shot at Dex's place in Karen. Yeah, and it was also good shooting with him because I also got to use a bit more of his equipment. Here's me just setting up the key light and then the hair light and the hair light. So I felt like this one, even at 1%, it was a bit too saucy. So I just added on like a piece of white paper to kind of diffuse it a bit. You can see this is the final setup. That is the lighting breakdown. Same sort of thing. 3-point lights, three-point light setup. Key light on one side. So the hair light on the other side. And now the black flag, just to help with the contrast and cutting of the light that is coming from the hair light. Same thing for the interview for Degs. Just shifted things around a bit. Didn't really change in the setup, but just like tilted the entire setup to the right, to the left, so that I can shoot into the opposite corner. from the one that I shot Josh. This is the lighting setup, as you can see. I'll just share everything that I have, every sort of asset, every lighting diagram. I'll share it below. Yeah. So yeah, that's just basically it, and this was now just us wrapping up the last day of production, going home. Yeah. It was an interesting production period. For 4 production days, the span of 2 weeks, 8 interviews. It was ilikuwa challenging, but it was challenging in a good way, because the thing that I learned from this entire production period was how to make everything kind of look consistent but different at the same time. Because if I shot all the interviews in one place, I think I would not have gotten the effect that I got from each and every one of these interviews. So it was interesting having all these different production days, and even pushing myself to ensure that I can maintain a level of consistency with how each and every interview looks, with how each and every interview feels. And yeah, I think it was a good challenge. It was a good challenge, and it was a good production period, because we got all the assets that we needed for the documentary to make sense in the way that it does. Now we jump into the final part of production, which is the post-production. I think I had drastically underestimated this part, because when I was making my timeline for the completion of this film, I had given myself like 1 month to edit the entire documentary. But it ended up taking more than 5 months from the period that I finished production to the day that I finally exported the final cut of the film. Ilikuwa noma. I think I had by underestimating the scale of this project. But I guess it was supposed to be a learning lesson for me. So I think one of the biggest challenges that I had in production or in post-production was trying to ensure that the story flows, and wanting the documentary to be as short as I had originally intended it. I wanted it to be between 65 to 70 minutes. That was my original plan. But it ended up being 1 hour 34 minutes, including the pre and post credits. Yeah, ilikuwa interesting, to be honest, because when I first assembled the interviews for everyone, it came to like 2 hours 20 minutes, without any spaces, without any breaks in between, without the B-roll or anything. So I had to see how I could cut it down and try to make it shorter without losing the flow of the story. Yeah, so I think that was one of the most interesting parts for me, because even though it was a challenge, it also helped me to see that not everything that is good should make the cut. I think so. Yeah, that's why I think in editing people say that you should kill your darlings, because the shots that look most interesting, or the things in an interview that people say that you might just be like, hey, your part in a bamba. I think that is the part. There are some of those parts that won't make it to the final film, and that's okay. Yeah, so yeah, I think with this I'll just take you through how I organized my entire project in DaVinci Resolve. I started editing in DaVinci Resolve, I think, this year. So this project was like the first test of how much I can push the project, or how I can push this software. Yeah, so I'll go into how everything was organized. So I have like 7 folders. These folders have everything: the archived footage, the timelines for the project, the audio, the BTS, of course, and any extra assets that I will need, the timelines for each interview, and the raw interviews. So everyone has a folder for their own interview. And I think the most important thing here was, for me, that helped me during this editing phase, was that after every interview, I came back home and cut down the interviews to the interesting parts. So I cut down the interviews to the interesting parts, reviewing myself as I asked the questions, and now just allowing me to see what everyone had said beforehand, and to see the interesting parts that I would pick and choose. So everyone had their own interview cut down, and I color coded everyone's interview to a different color, so that in the final, when you look at the final edit, you can see how everything is laid out, and you can see how beautiful. You can know that this is from dad, this is from mom, this is from sir. Yeah. So after assembling the different, like everyone's interview on their own, I was starting to assemble the interviews together. So I have the first assembly of the interviews. Yeah, you can see tunafika mpaka 215. Yeah. Every time I cut down the interview, I saved it to a new timeline, so that it would be easy to go back and forth in between the different timelines. I had like 4 stages of assembly for the interviews before I even started putting B-roll and the other things. Now, between the first assembly for the interviews and the 4th assembly for the interviews, my goal was to ensure that I have a consistent flow of the story. So this is what I did. And after ensuring now the story in the way that I wanted it to, and cutting it down as much as I could without losing the essence of the story that I am trying to tell, I moved to the final assembly of the interviews, and then I moved to the rough cut of the master, which had all the interviews, and now even had some of the B-roll and the photos that I would use for throughout. It is also in the rough cut where I created my captions for the entire film. And after assembling the rough cut, now I moved to the final cut, where I knew that because everything was in picture lock, I could also just now also work on the audio, work on the levels for the dialogue, the sound effects and the music. This is how my project looked in DaVinci Resolve. So you can see that I have many different folders just to help me ensure that I am well organized and know where everything is in the editing software to make the process simple. And now how I used Milanote in the post-production was to create an editing timeline for myself, where it was a checklist, where you can see how everything I did went from the cut down of the interviews to importing and organizing all the other assets. The first assembly, the second assembly, the third assembly. So, to going slowly up until I finished and uploaded the final cut to YouTube. Yeah, so this in itself, the post-production phase was also massive, and it taught me a lot. It taught me the importance of, I think there are so many things that I would do differently here, especially with how I filmed, with the assets that I had as well. I think I did not have enough supporting assets, especially of myself and interacting with my friends and family, to help fill in the gaps between the story. Yeah, so I think there's so much that I could do better. But yeah, this is the first one, so I know what to do, what I'll do moving forward. So now, as we move on from the post-production process, we go into the what is it called? The distribution phase of it. So originally, I had big dreams for this project. I had big intentions for it. I wanted to try to get it into some film festivals, and see maybe possibly if tunaweza ndio route ya streaming. But I think how I originally intended the project to go in my head is not how it went. So kulikuwa tu na obstacles mob between me and trying to push it to film festivals. I think also I spent so much time in the post-production process that it reached a point where I was like, I have to complete this film and put it out there. Because things didn't go as I had originally intended them. I decided that the best platform for distribution for the film would be YouTube. And I think I set high goal, big goals for myself and the film, especially as my first film. So yeah, it's okay, and I understand that I'm not where I'm supposed to be or where I want to be. So it's okay that things didn't go as I had planned. But even reaching to the point where I have actually completed the film is something that I also know that I should be proud of as well. So I decided that the best platform for distribution would be YouTube. So in regards to that, I created a promotion and advertising plan where I would have everything that I needed for the film in one place. I got stills from the film, from my edit, just to help me have a better idea of how the project would go and how exactly it would look as I push it out. So my chosen platforms for distribution were Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, especially YouTube Shorts, where now in the lead up to releasing the film, I would release snippets of each interview, the parts that from each interview that spoke to me, like the parts that were the most interesting, and now slowly building up to the release of the poster, and even now just give people the first look and the first mention of the documentary as a film. Yeah, so it was an interesting process. I think I have so much to learn, especially when it comes to distributing independently, rather distributing independent films, because you can put so much effort into creating the film, but not having a place where it will live or how people will see it. It wouldn't make sense. So instead of creating the film and now telling myself, oh, I'll put it into full film festivals or wait till the right opportunity comes about, I decided to launch it and publish it on YouTube. Yeah. this is where this BTS comes in. So it was an interesting process for me. It's something that I have never done before. I have made several short documentaries before, but I haven't taken up something of this scale and challenged myself to see how much I can push myself, challenged to see just what I can create if I put my head and my heart into it, because I also put my heart into it. Yeah, so it was a very interesting experience, and I hope that I can be able to do more of it. Not of myself, of course, but of other people, because as an artist, as a storyteller, my objective is to allow people to speak and allow people to express themselves. And if I can tell the story of a person who maybe we do not know, or maybe we have not heard of, if I can tell their story in a way that appeals to many people, then I would have done my job. And that is my intention, to consistently give people the space to speak, and to speak about what they're passionate about, to express themselves in the same way that I do with my art form. Yeah. So expect to see more documentaries from me. Expect to see just more work from me as I navigate and try to build myself as a photographer and filmmaker in this space. I know that I've skimmed through the entire process of how I made it, but if there's anything more that you would want me to talk about specifically, please let me know, and I will try to do so. And if you haven't watched the final documentary, I will link it up here somewhere. Yeah, so that you can just get a better understanding of what I'm rambling on about at this point in time. So thank you for watching. Thank you for your support all through my journey. And expect a lot more to come. We've just started. Peace, love, and light.